Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're plunging into the intricate world of Romania's primary domestic intelligence agency, the Serviciul Roman de Informare, or SRI.
Yeah, intelligence services, they always operate behind this sort of veil, don't they? Makes them fascinating. We've got a really interesting set of sources today that should let us explore the SRI's history, its structure, and kind of its place in Romanian society.
Exactly. We've pulled together quite a range of material historical accounts of its predecessors, right up to modern analyses of what it actually does.
Hmm.
Our mission really is to unpack the SRI's origins, see how it evolved, understand its current operations, and importantly, look at some of the big controversies it's been caught up in. Okay, so where does this story even start?
Well, what's interesting is that the idea of a central intelligence body in Romania actually popped up pretty early on. Our research shows that back in 1865, they set up the Secaya, the second section, within the Romanian General Staff.
1865, wow.
Yeah. It was focused purely on military intelligence, and they actually modeled it on the French system. So that early move, it signals this initial understanding that, dedicated intelligence was strategically important.
Okay, so military intelligence first. But I guess the need for something broader came up pretty quickly.
It did. By 1892, you have the General Safety Bureau created, this time under the Ministry of the Interior. Its job was wider overall state security, but it had limitations. A big one was the lack of coordination nationally.
How so?
Well, the regional police forces were often really tied up with local politics, so having a unified national intelligence approach before about 1905 was, well, difficult.
Right, a kind of fragmented system susceptible to local influence. What changed that? What was the trigger?
The 1907 Peasants' Revolt. That was a massive turning point. This huge wave of unrest just completely exposed the weaknesses in the state's ability to see the big picture.
What do you mean, big picture?
Yeah. Like understanding the why behind the revolt, the root causes, and also, importantly, whether there was any foreign meddling involved. They just didn't have the insight.
Ah, okay.
So this event really drove home the need for a more effective, centralized security oversight. That lack of understanding during a major crisis, it was a real wake-up call.
Sounds like that revolt really laid bare a critical vulnerability.
Precisely. And almost immediately, in March 1908, the General Safety Bureau became the Police and General Safety Directorate. It kept the national law enforcement role, but crucially, it also formalized gathering political intelligence systematically.
And did they fix the local politics issue?
They tried. They reorganized the police infrastructure into regional brigades. The whole point was to make them independent from local political pressures, to ensure consistency and reliability across the country.
Makes sense. Standardize it, insulate it. So how did this new directorate share information?
It became more structured. They worked with places like the prefect's office of the capital city police, the general inspectorate of the gendarmerie. And interestingly, at the same time, the Romanian army was also building up its own intelligence and counterintelligence units separately.
So parallel tracks developing.
Yeah, handling both domestic and foreign stuff. So you had these different streams of intelligence gathering kind of growing alongside each other.
Multiple players.
Yeah.
Then comes World War I. Huge upheaval. How did that affect Romania's intelligence game?
World War I, 1914-18, it threw everything at them. Internal unrest, corruption, massive espionage, plus the whole war for national unification. But surprisingly, those earlier steps towards centralizing intelligence, they actually helped.
Oh, really? How?
Well, the system, imperfect as it might have been, allowed the state to protect itself better against big external threats. They actually managed to uncover German spies who'd gotten into pretty high levels of government and the military, so those early decisions paid off under pressure.
So those centralizing efforts proved vital in a crisis. But the war ended, and that brought a whole new set of problems, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. After the war, Romania got much bigger, territorially speaking. 3 new provinces came in,
Right.
and that meant diverse ethnic minorities suddenly part of the country. Some formed political groups, even revolutionary ones, causing more internal friction. Plus, all the social chaos after the war meant national security concerns turned inwards, mostly.
Okay, so focusing heavily on domestic issues. Does that mean they maybe took their eye off the ball regarding external threats?
That's a fair point. While everyone was looking inwards, Romania's location strategically vital and its resources made it a target. You had big powers, Germany, the Anglo-Americans vying for influence.
So spy games?
Pretty much. Espionage activities by countries like France and the UK were happening. Romania basically became this sort of quiet battleground for international intelligence agencies.
A hidden struggle. That must have ramped up the pressure for a more dedicated, specialized service, right?
Definitely. By 1925, a guy named Mikhail Morozov finally persuaded the general staff they needed a proper secret service. Civilians gathering intel specifically for the army.
Okay, so a civilian arm for military intel.
Yeah, and a stronger link between intelligence and counterintelligence. They focused on politics, the economy, minority groups, counterespionage, and this is where you see surveillance techniques really starting to develop, especially targeting ethnic minorities.
Morozov. Sounds like a key figure. But his leadership, it wasn't exactly smooth sailing, was it?
That's putting it mildly. Morozov was in charge during a really volatile time. You had the rise of the Iron Guard, this ultranationalist group, the looming threat of communism, the monarchy's shifting role. It was chaotic.
And his methods?
Well, he apparently gathered a lot of compromising information, compromise on political figures. That seems to have been his style. And ultimately that, combined with the changing political winds, led to his downfall. Ion Antonescu took power, and in September 1940, Morozov was arrested and put on trial. His tactics definitely blurred the lines.
A dramatic exit.
Yeah.
So Antonescu takes over. What happens to the service then?
Antonescu, probably learning from Morozov's era, reorganized it in 1940, renamed it the Special Service of Intelligence, SSI. Eugen Cristescu became director.
And the big change?
The SSI reported directly to the head of state, Antonescu. That cut down the army's direct influence, though they still cooperated, but it also meant way more direct government control over intelligence.
Right. From army oversight to direct state control. That's a fundamental shift.
It is. And as World War II got closer, the SSI started attracting negative attention from other parts of the government, like the Ministry of Justice. That relative autonomy Morozov had, however controversial, was gone. Now it was under direct government thumbs, which, historically opens the door to using intelligence for political suppression. Plus, the Iron Guard was getting closer to German intelligence, making things even more dangerous for opponents of the regime.
A really perilous time.
Yeah.
Then the communist era arrives. Complete political overhaul. How did the intelligence service fit into that?
Under communism, 1947 to 89, the service basically became an arm of the party. Its main job was political control, repressing anyone seen as anti-communist or just disagreeing with the government. The Securitate, that's the name everyone remembers, became the feared political police.
Infamous.
Absolutely. Widespread surveillance, intimidation, brutal crackdowns on any dissent, national security and enforcing ideology just became the same thing. A really dark period.
Truly oppressive. So fast forward to the Romanian Revolution, December 1989. Massive change. What happened to the Securitate machine then?
In the chaos right after the revolution, Ion Iliescu, who took charge of the interim government, signed an order. It basically folded the Securitate into the Ministry of Defense, put it under his control.
Right.
The Securitate chief, Olin Vlad, and some of his deputies were arrested pretty quickly by the end of '89. Iliescu then appointed Gelu Voiculescu to run this new integrated structure.
So swift change at the top.
Yeah.
But did that actually dismantle the old ways, the old network?
Well, it seems like there was a lot of continuity. Voiculescu apparently told security officers, look, no mass purges. And by mid-January 90, reports suggest many were back at their old desks in their old buildings.
Right.
Yeah. There were public statements saying phone tapping gear was shut down, but, no proof was ever offered. So the name was changing, but the people and maybe some of the methods seemed to stick around.
Significant continuity, just rebranded. So how did the SRI, the current agency, officially come about?
The SRI, Serviciul Roman de Informații, was formally set up by government decree on March 26, 1990. And crucially, it inherited everything, buildings, staff, equipment from the old Securitate.
Right.
This happened just days after those violent ethnic clashes up in Târgu Mureș. And it's worth remembering, at that point, there were actually two other intelligence services still operating. 0215 and the Foreign Intelligence Service.
Inheriting the Security's assets. Wow. That must have brought a mountain of baggage, especially those infamous Securitate archives.
Oh, absolutely. That inheritance has dogged the SRI ever since. Accusations flew immediately that they were destroying files or maybe selectively leaking damaging info on politicians.
Any specific incidents?
The Brevoy incident is probably the most famous. June 1990, SRI officers were caught literally burying truckloads of Securitate documents in a forest. Locals found them.
No way.
Yep. The newspaper, Romania Libera, published some of it, showed info on dissidents, some allegedly still being watched by the new SRI. It was a huge scandal, shattered public trust right out of the gate.
That Brevoy Ice story sounds like a defining moment, really damaging confidence early on.
It absolutely was, and it led directly to a new law on state secrets, which basically made it illegal to publish any SRI documents. It wasn't until 2005, 15 years later, that they even started transferring some Securitate archives to an independent body, the CNSIS.
CNS.
The National Council for the Study of the Securitate Archives. The idea was to transfer files not deemed vital for national security. But that long delay, that careful selection process, it just fed suspicions about what might have been hidden or shredded.
A long, messy transition. Okay, let's shift gears to the SRI today. What's its current structure? How does it actually work now?
Right, so officially formed March 26, 1990. Headquarters in Bucharest. Its budget, as of 2020, was pretty hefty, EUR 541 million. It's currently run by an acting director, General Razvan Ionescu, with several deputies.
And its main job?
Its core role, according to our sources, is gathering intelligence related to Romania's national security and feeding that info to the key players. The government, the presidency, law enforcement. It's essentially the central hub for domestic security intelligence.
The main internal intel hub.
Yeah.
And how do they gather this information? What methods?
They use the standard intelligence playbook, really. Signals intelligence, so intercepting electronic communications, phone calls, internet traffic, that kind of thing. OSINT, open source intelligence, analyzing publicly available stuff like news, social media, academic reports, and human intelligence, getting information from people, from agents.
And where do they operate? Just inside Romania?
Mostly, yeah. Primarily domestic focus. But they do cooperate internationally with other agencies, especially when dealing with threats that cross borders, like terrorism or organized crime.
Okay, working domestically and internationally. What about the people inside the SRI? Is it like the military?
It's described as a militarized institution, so yes, they use military ranks, have that kind of structure, but they're not actually part of the Romanian armed forces.
And how many people work there?
Well, that's classified. The exact number is secret, but there are estimates floating around. Back in 2006, someone guessed around 12,000 agents. A former foreign intelligence chief supposedly backed that up.
12,000? That sounds like a lot.
It does. And counteracting that, you have Ion Mihai Pacepa, a famous defector from the communist era, who claimed that number was ridiculously large compared to, say, France or Germany. More recently, in 2018, the SRI director at the time, George Mayer, said they had about 3,000 operative employees.
Okay, 3,000 operatives is very different from 12,000 total staff.
Exactly. Operatives plus support staff, accountants, IT, legal folks who are civilians. Mayer also mentioned their average salary was above the national average, but that big gap in estimates just shows how secret the staffing really is.
A huge difference. Definitely highlights the secrecy. How does someone even get a job there? What's a recruitment like?
It's tough. You need Romanian citizenship, meet age criteria, clean criminal record, no major health issues. Then there are background checks, medical exams, psychological tests, aptitude tests, personality checks, physical fitness tests, and a written exam on general knowledge.
Sounds intense.
It is. The main way in seems to be through the National Intelligence Academy in Bucharest. It's a rigorous process designed to filter people very carefully.
A demanding path. We also read about a specific unit, the Anti-Terrorist Brigade. BD, or USLA.
Yes, Beat 28LLA. That's the SRI's elite special operations unit, Romania's main counterterrorism force. It actually started back in the mid-70s as RTGay, mainly a reaction to the Munich massacre at the Olympics. Later renamed USLA. Sadly, 8 members were killed during the '89 revolution. It's made up of top-tier operatives. Apparently, many come from backgrounds in combat sports. Their jobs include securing major airports and putting air marshals on Romanian flights. They're the sharp end for serious terror threats.
Highly trained, dealing with major threats. Okay, as we mentioned, the SRI hasn't avoided controversy. Let's dive into some of those. The Minariad in 1990, those violent protests. What's the alleged SRI connection?
The Minariad, yeah, that's still a raw nerve. The SRI's alleged role is super controversial. What happened was, June 12, 1990, the government decided to use the police, the army, and the SRI to clear protesters out of University Square in Bucharest. During the clashes, protesters actually attacked the SRI headquarters itself, which shows you the level of anger towards the agency back then. Then, over the next few days, thousands of coal miners were bussed into Bucharest.
They miners, right.
And they violently cracked down on the remaining protesters. People were killed, many injured. They also attacked opposition party headquarters. It was brutal.
And what are the specific allegations tying the SRI to the miners' actions?
Well, the prime minister at the time, Petri Roman, wrote a letter to President Iliescu claiming the whole operation, bringing the miners in, directing them, was orchestrated by the secret services, led by Virgil Magarianu using the old Securitate network.
Wow. Orchestrated.
That was the claim. A military prosecutor later backed this up, saying police and SRI agents escorted the miners and basically pointed them towards targets. Investigations were opened into Magarianu, Iliescu, and others for really serious charges: genocide, torture related to the Myriad.
But what came of those investigations?
Nothing, ultimately. Despite the severity of the claims, no charges were filed back in 2009. That lack of accountability is still a major point of contention in Romania.
A deeply troubling event with serious accusations hanging over the SRI leadership. Another huge controversy. Phone tapping. What do the sources say about that?
Phone tapping has been a recurring nightmare for the SRI's image. In 1996, a whistleblower, an ex-SRI guy named Constantin Bucur, came forward. He revealed the SRI was illegally tapping phones of politicians, journalists, public figures.
Illegally.
That was the accusation. Bucur himself was convicted in Romania for spilling state secrets, but he took his case to the European Court of Human Rights, the ECHR, and won.
He won at the ECHR.
Yes. And Mircea Toma, a journalist whose phone was tapped, also won against Romania at the ECHR, got compensation. Interestingly, the SRI apparently refused to cooperate with the ECHR during these cases, citing state secrets. It really highlights that tension between security claims and basic privacy rights.
Sounds like a pattern of potential overreach and ignoring privacy rights.
It seems that way. There's a Romanian NGO that watches state agencies, and its head claims they have evidence illegal tapping is still going on. Plus, a former attorney general stated that something like 20,000 people had their phones tapped between 91 and 2003.
20,000?
That was his figure. Now, the government releases stats on authorized taps for national security or organized crime. But the conviction rate for the organized crime taps is apparently quite low, which makes you wonder about the justification for some of them. We even have data from 2005 showing thousands tapped, often for months at a time, big cases, like the businessman Dinu Petruciu winning compensation for illegal tapping, or the investigation into the tapping of an ECHR judge, Corneliu Birsan. It all points to a really problematic history with surveillance.
Clearly a very sensitive issue with major legal and ethical questions. What about the SRI's relationship with the press? That sounds like another area of friction.
That's putting it mildly. The relationship seems deeply strained. Accusations have flown for years that the SRI monitors journalists, tries to infiltrate newsrooms, and even sees the press itself as a security risk.
A security risk. The press.
Unbelievably, yes. In 2010, Romania's national defense strategy actually listed the press as a national vulnerability. Think about that.
That's remarkable.
There was an incident back in '96 where a journalist was clearly being followed by SRI agents. The SRI later called it a mistake, but it suggested surveillance was happening. Even more blatant was in 2006 when the SRI's own press officer admitted publicly that they'd always had moles in the media.
They admitted having moles?
Yep. Defended it as not illegal, but it caused a huge uproar, raised fears about political policing, manipulating news. There have also been cases like an editor-in-chief fired allegedly for collaborating with the SRI. And in 2013, Director George Mayer accused the press of running an attack campaign against the SRI, linking it to investigations into those alleged secret CIA prisons in Romania. So yeah, adversarial is a good word for it.
A very worrying dynamic. Serious questions about press freedom and transparency there. Did we find any more positive, publicly known operations the SRI was involved in?
Yes, there are a few notable successes that were made public. The big one was probably in 2005, the rescue of 3 Romanian journalists kidnapped in Iraq. The SRI got a lot of credit for coordinating that complex operation.
Okay, the Iraq kidnapping rescue.
Yeah, believed to be run by a senior figure, Florian Koldea. Then in 2008, they arrested a Bulgarian military attaché and a Romanian NCO for espionage that got significant press and showed their counterintelligence role.
So a mix of high-profile successes alongside the controversies. We also came across something called the Integrated Information System, SII. What's that all about?
The SII.
Right.
This is a big one. It's a massive computer system set up in 2003. Its purpose is to let the SRI pull together and analyze huge amounts of data from pretty much all government agencies in Romania.
All agencies?
That seems to be the goal. It was started under a former SRI director, got approval from the Supreme Council of National Defense. But here's the really controversial part. It apparently operates based on secret laws. laws that were never published.
Secret laws for a massive data system.
Exactly. That raises huge red flags about transparency and oversight. The only public bit is a government decision telling all state bodies they must feed their data into this system. But there are no public rules about how it's controlled or how to prevent abuse.
Secret laws, mandatory data feeding, no public oversight.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds right for potential problems.
It does. We're talking data on Romanians and foreigners when they enter, leave the country, cars they own, phone metadata, taxes paid, all flowing into this one system. Even who sits on the council overseeing the SII and where its headquarters are located. That's all classified.
Has anyone challenged this?
Yes, a major Romanian human rights NGO took it to court. They argued the SIR was illegal because of the secret laws and lack of oversight, violating basic human rights, but they lost the case. So this powerful data hoover exists largely outside public view.
And it sounds like its capabilities might be growing.
That's the concern. In 2016, the SRI got significant EU funding for a project called SII Analytics. Officially, it's for e-government, making things more efficient, but parts of it look like a clear expansion of surveillance. Things like intercepting communications, facial recognition tech.
Facial recognition.
Yeah, and perhaps most chillingly, the project talks about creating good behavior files for every citizen, pulling data from all connected agencies. That raises profound questions about state surveillance and profiling, completely outside public scrutiny.
Good behavior files maintained by the state. Now, that's incredibly concerning. Okay, one last system mentioned. The National Alert System, SNA.
Right, the SNA. This is basically Romania's official terror threat level indicator. It uses intelligence from the SRI, the Foreign Service, maybe others, to assign a color code green for low risk up to red for imminent threat.
And who decides the level?
Changing the color requires approval from the SRI's top leadership. Currently, it's blue, which means cautious. Apparently, it's only ever been raised once to yellow, moderate, during the NATO summit in Bucharest back in 2008. We also saw budget figures fluctuating over the years, with that 2020 number being EUR 541 million, showing significant resources go into these operations.
Okay, terror alert system, significant funding. Well, we've certainly covered a lot of ground in this deep dive on the SRI. What stand out as the key takeaways for you?
For me, it's really that long, complex history, how it grew from military intelligence roots into this powerful domestic agency. You see how major events, revolts, wars, revolution really shaped it. Its structure, its powers, its whole culture. And it's clear the SRI uses a wide range of pretty sophisticated intelligence methods. But as we've seen again and again, its work has constantly been shadowed by controversy surveillance powers, that tense relationship with the press, and the fundamental questions about accountability and oversight in a democracy. Those themes just keep coming up.
Absolutely. And hopefully this deep dive is giving you, our listener, a much clearer picture of the SRI, where it came from, how it evolved, what it does now, and the debates that swirl around it.
Yeah.
So thinking about that long, often troubled history, its current power, the secrecy, what are the biggest challenges today in balancing Romania's national security needs with protecting basic individual freedoms? And maybe what questions does this leave you with about the role and oversight of intelligence agencies, not just in Romania, but in any democracy, trying to find that balance between security and liberty? Definitely something to ponder until our next deep dive.